everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's Christina with Read.Pray.Disney. Here in this channel, we like to talk all things Disney, from packing to planning to pins to books and so much more. So if you are new here, thank you so much for stopping by. I hope that you will find some information helpful in this video if you are on this journey. If you are not new here, thank you for coming by. I really appreciate it. You get to know a little bit more about me. And yeah, so by the title of the video, you can see this is my infertility journey. You're like, Christina, this is kind of off brand for you, but not really. It is and it isn't. So I put this here in my Finding Your Grace series because one, this video is requested by my husband. He really wanted me to share this story, and it's very surprising. But I think part of it is because, you know, it's a story that I think people don't often tell, and or are scared to tell, or just I don't know. But either way, I'm here telling you my story, and I put this in the Finding Your Grace series because there is a lot of grace to be found throughout my journey. My journey has ended. I will say that, and I'll explain that to you. But if you've been with me on any length of time, that you know my daughter, especially here recently, I think I did a Finding Your Grace on it too, but my daughter was conceived through IVF, right? So end result, yay, I got a kid. But I had to have medical intervention to do so. All right. But to understand my journey is to understand the beginning. So we will start with the beginning. Because I know for me, when I was going through this, there wasn't YouTube was a thing, but it wasn't a whole lot of people talking about this sort of thing. And even when they were talking about it, no one really talked about the beginning of how we knew there was a problem. So FYI, if you're watching this with kids, I mean, nothing major or grotesque, but I am going to talk about a little bit about some things, you know, feminine things that happen. So if this is not something that you want to watch with your child, I suggest, you know, exit stage left. But if you are ready, I shall proceed. So in the beginning, I met, let's see, that's not what I met. Let me go back to when I started on birth control when I was, I want to say like 20, 21, maybe even 19, 20, 21, somewhere around there. Not because of, you know, what it's intended, but I started on birth control because from as long as I can remember, I have always had a very heavy and painful cycle. I was very regular. I never missed, except for the time that I was in basic training. I missed then. But other than that, I was a very regular, heavy flow person. And when I say heavy flow, ladies, for those of y'all that know, I had the purple pads. You know, the ones that came all the way up here behind. And I love my husband because I will say, I will just side note, my husband is amazing. He is, I have never known a man that when I was going through my stuff, he went into Walgreens. I remember one time I was, it was a lot, and I couldn't get out of bed, couldn't do anything. I ran out, and my husband said, "I got you." He went to walk. I had never seen a case of pads. My husband brought the box. I said, "You do?" He goes, "Yeah." The guy took me in the back and brought a box of pads and walked up to the register. I'm buying this for my wife, and no ifs, ands, or buts. Anyway, side note. Okay. But yes, I was on birth control for the longest time. For those who are new to your infertility cycle, one of the questions they ask you is, when did you first start your cycle? I never understood why that was relevant, but whatever. I started like on time, like most kids, around 13. So, but my cycles have always been very heavy. You're talking about when it comes to the flow, the bleeding, I would go through at my worst, I would go through about six to seven of the purple pads a day, and still have bleed through. Okay, so that's how bad the flow was. Okay, so um, the thing is that while I was on birth control to help the flow and to help with the pain. And I used patches and I used the pills. I never did the injections. The shots. I never did those, but I used patches and I used pills, but I used different variations of those patches and pills. And it seemed to keep me what I thought was normal for people. That's the best I can say. I mean, I think at that point I was still wearing the big ones, the big purple pads, but I would only go through maybe 4 a day. Um, so for me, that was significantly less. Okay. So along comes my husband, and my husband, we're like, yay, let's try to have some kids. And I will say that he is active duty Army. And so what happened was he was deployed, but he was coming back. And I knew that when he was going to come back. So I came off of my medication because we were going to go ahead and try. Now, mind you, I didn't know anything was wrong down there other than I just had a heavy cycle because I never tried to get pregnant. And so I meet this wonderful man that I want to have a child with. And so I come off my birth control, and in preparation for him returning. And so, if you've ever been on birth control, you got to come off like about a 30, well, the doctor told me was about 30 to 60 days be off. And then it's mostly out of your system and you could, potentially get pregnant from there. It's like, okay. So I came off my birth control, and the very first cycle after coming off of, at that time I was on patches, after coming off of my patches, I had the worst pain that I experienced up to that point. It gets worse, but up to that point. And I remember getting out of bed and I was like, oh my God. And I remember getting out of bed and I stood up. And when I stood up, it was like somebody had a cup and just dumped all of my feminine stuff out of me. Like it just, whoosh, and it scared the heck out of me because I never knew. I was like, oh my God, what's going on? So go to the doctor, come to find out I had a fibroid growing inside of, or on my, now it was growing in a particular way. It was at the top part of my uterine lining, and it was the size of a grapefruit, is what they said, that it was growing into the uterine lining. So I had what's called a myomectomy. Y'all, I'm not sure what a myomectomy is, but they did it. At that point, they went in vaginally and removed the myomectomy, but I was told at that point from where it was and how they had to suture me and everything like that, that I, at that point, should not ever deliver vaginally or risk of tearing the place. And I could carry, but I just could not deliver because, when you deliver, there's too much disturbance and in the contractions and stuff of pushing. Could potentially tear, and if it tore, that's not a bleeding that they could stop. So I knew from that point going forward I could not deliver vaginally if I ever had a baby. I was like, okay, good to know. So they got me all taken care of, and at that point, now this is important to know because at that point they were inside my body, but no one said anything. No one knew and saw anything. I don't know. But come to find out, well, not come to find out. So we proceed, and after I'm healed, we're trying, and we tried for about a year or so, nothing is happening, and we tried, we gave it a good shot and it wasn't working. So we're like, okay, well, let's go see. So I went in, and if you are active duty military, you know that generally you are not sent to a fertility specialist right away. You are sent to your primary care physician, and from there, at least where we were on Fort Hood, they sent me to my primary care physician sent me to their fertility person, which was a registered nurse, and that was like her specialty was fertility. Okay. And so when we went in to see her, she had started telling me that I needed to get on Clomid. And so we're like, okay, sure, I'll take Clomid. So I took Clomid because my husband got checked and he was fine. And so it seemed like it was me. So we took Clomid, I took the Clomid, and nothing happened. So ideally what happens when you take Clomid is that Clomid is a medication that overstimulates your ovarian production, supposedly. I say supposedly because it didn't work for me, but overstimulate your ovarian production, so that a lot of people who do take Clomid, when they get pregnant, a lot of times they have twins because it's overstimulation. That didn't work for me. We did Clomid, and so I went in, I think I did 2 rounds of Clomid, and nothing happened. And so we went back and we're like, hey, okay, nothing's going on. She's like, okay, well, at this point, you definitely probably want to see a fertility specialist, like an actual fertility doctor. And so we're like, okay, well, sign us up. And she said, it's not that easy. So in the military, there are 2 places in the United States that I am aware of, that's one out here in Maryland, or not out here, I'm in Virginia currently, but in Maryland. And then at that time we were in Texas, and it's in San Antonio, Texas. So those are the 2 places. And there was a wait list. There was a 2-year wait list. 2 years. We were denied twice on that wait list, to get on the wait list, because it was just so long. So in the midst of that, after the first denial, we were, and the side note, she told me, the nurse told me at that time that, well, part of the things, you just need to lose weight. And if you know me, I'm a fluffier girl, right? But at that time, I think at that time I was right at about 200 pounds. Because we had I think I was right at about 200 pounds, maybe 205 right at that point. And she told me that I needed to lose weight. That was my part of my problem, was that I needed to lose weight. And if I lost weight and got on the Clomid, then that should take care of it. None of that worked. Okay. So then we get down to our first denial. After our first denial, it was a little crushing. And so then we sought out outside resources. Like, well, the military isn't the only place that does fertility stuff, so let's go see who else does fertility stuff. And we found Texas Fertility. And they're in Austin, Texas. Remember, at that time we were, I didn't say remember like you knew, we were in Fort Hood, Texas, which is in Killeen, Texas. And so I would travel down to Texas Fertility in Austin, Texas, to meet with them. So one of the first things they said was, we need to get some fibroids out of you, because before we touch you and do anything, there are some fibroids that need to be removed. Like, okay. So we're like, okay, we scheduled that appointment to get some fibroids removed. They sent me to an oncologist, and the oncologist was like, yeah, we need to go ahead and take care of that. And we had the appointment for July 6th. I remember this as clear as day. We had the appointment for July 6th, for the removal. 4th of July, we were at home, and we were doing some grocery shopping, and nothing seemed to be a problem. Like, everything was fine, and we were walking around the store, and all of a sudden I felt this pain that I had never felt before. And it feels like I'm saying that over and over, but this was something that I had never felt before. It felt like somebody had taken a knife and just was stabbing and slashing through me. All the while, like, somebody's like punched you and is just grinding it in my abdomen area. Like, it was slashing and the pain I cannot describe to you. And it happened while I was just walking around. I wasn't doing anything strenuous or anything like that. So I already knew that I had a fibroid on my left ovary. And so and a couple other ones. And I knew those were there, and we knew that we were going to get them removed. So, I didn't know what was going on. We got to I stayed home for a while that night. So I was like, okay, well, I've been through pain before. It's just another whatever. It's fine. We got an appointment later. It's fine. And I waited. It was just a few hours. I waited a few hours. And it got to the point where I couldn't sit, I couldn't lay, I couldn't move, I couldn't do, there was nothing that was going to make me comfortable to ride out the pain. So, and then at that point, I started shaking because the pain was so much. Started seeing a little bit of stars because the pain was so much. And I said, okay, I need to go to the hospital. So my husband, we get into the hospital, he gets me in the car and we're going to the hospital. But at the whole time while we're driving, every hole in the road felt like, I don't know, I have no words to tell you what it felt like. That ride was so painful. And we get to the hospital and all I want is just let me sleep. I just want to sleep. I just want to sleep. That's all I want to do. Just let me sleep. Because there was nothing in my mind. There was nothing that could be done. So they get me in and they start, they do all hospital things, right? And, they're checking vitals, they're doing all of this and all these questions, and I'm in and out of it. I'm trying to tell you what's going on. It was just, this pain is so much. Eventually they try to do a vaginal exam and I almost kicked the guy. But so all long story short, what happened is that, my ovary had ruptured. The cyst on my ovary, it was a cyst on my ovary, not a fibroid. It was a cyst on my ovary that had ruptured, and it took the ovary with it when it ruptured. It's just, yeah. So they went in to go take care. So I had emergency surgery to go in and take care of that, and come to find out that lo and behold, I have endometriosis. And the endometriosis had been growing and it's been insidious. It had been growing up so to the point to where it had caked over, doctor's words, not mine, had caked over other organs. And so they're inside, to my understanding, the cyst and all that had ruptured, and there was free fluid within my cavity, my uterine cavity, and inside my body. There was free fluids, and then on top of that, all the endometriosis. So at some point during the surgery, and they're shifting and looking, they couldn't find my appendix because they thought that how much pain I was in, that it was equivalent to my appendix rupturing, but they couldn't find it. Come to find out that the endometriosis had grown so far up, it had corroded my appendix. So really, I was on borrowed time. If it wasn't the ovary and the cyst, it was going to be my appendix, one or the other. And, everybody says, when you have surgery, it's like, well, I almost died. Well, really and truly, had I waited a few hours, I would not have made it. Because there was so much bleeding and there was so much free fluid, and it was just a lot happening. And my understanding is that I was on the table for about 6 hours. They ran my entire intestines to clear everything out, like pulled my intestines out of my body. They did all this stuff to clear everything out, and then stapled me, 52 staples later, stapled me back together with a brand new belly button. I see the old one and the new one all at the same time. It's really weird. So all of that happened, and that is when I find out that I have endometriosis, and rather an insidious form of endometriosis. So that was the first time that had ever been mentioned. So they went in, they cleaned everything out. They cleaned out my endometriosis, they cleaned out my fibroids, they cleaned out any other cysts that were in there. They took care of everything. I was in the hospital for about 6 days afterwards, because then I had an infection or whatever, but I survived. So, oh, sorry, kick this TV. So, anyway, where we go? Let me do that. Okay, sorry. So, yeah, I survived. That is an important story, because then that leads into, oh my gosh, our journey with Texas Fertility. So once I was healed from that, we go full steam forward with Texas Fertility, because we knew that at this point I really was on borrowed time, because my endometriosis kept growing. So they kept checking and it kept growing. There was no stopping it. And then there was just no stopping it. So we go with Texas Fertility, and they tried an IUI, And if you guys know what that is when they take, it's artificial insemination. Okay, so they take the male stuff and then they just inject it into you. So I did that one time, didn't work. I'm like, okay. So then after that, they're like, you know what? We don't want to try, because they tried, because with the IUI, they also stimulate you. You do your shots and they stimulate you to stimulate, kind of like how the Clomid was supposed to work with a pill. They give you shots, you take the shots to stimulate your ovary production. That way the insemination has a greater chance of taking. That didn't work. And based on that, that is where Texas Fertility decided that my ovaries were not viable. And yeah, they didn't want to try with my ovaries. Like I think we did it one more time. No, I think we tried the IUI twice. We tried the insemination twice, and each time it didn't take. And that's when they decided that we weren't going to stimulate. So what was happening was every time I stimulate, it's called stimulating, okay? When you do the shots, every time I stimulated, I only ever grew 3 follicles. Now follicles are just the egg sacs that your eggs grow in. Because I don't know if you guys know anything about anatomy, I learned a lot, but girls are only born with all the eggs they're ever going to have, right? So, and you lose a lot of eggs when you, as you grow and so forth, but we only are born with whatever we have. And so when those eggs come out, they grow in this like follicle thing. They look like little fingers, and they grow inside of that, and then that gets released down the fallopian tube and da 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 da. So I only ever grew 3 follicles, and one was always bigger than the others, but I only ever grew 3 follicles. So they decided based on that information that it was not viable to go in. It was not worth, keywords, that's what they said. It was not worth the time and money to go in and try to retrieve my eggs, because I only grew 3. Now, a young healthy female, when they stimulate a young healthy female, she will produce anywhere between 20 to 30 eggs. I only ever produced 3. So that's key information, so remember that. So what we ended up doing was it's odd because I just went through all of my old stuff and I found these pictures. We tried for a donor. Well, no, we did. We did a donor eggs. We did donor eggs. So I don't know about you guys, but that puts you in a different headspace to have to shop, literally shop. They gave me a website and they gave me a password, think Tinder kind of thing. There's into this database, there's all these women, and you get baby pictures of them. You get some, not basic, but you get some profile information about them, how tall they are, their ancestry, medical stuff. You get all this information. And so you're looking through these pictures. And for me, it put me in a very different headspace, because it's like, for me, shopping for someone who would make a good baby with my husband that could still kind of look like me. Yeah. And the sad thing about it is that if you are a person of color, meaning a Black or brown person, I would strongly suggest, if I could, I would strongly suggest, if you have it within you, please, please, please become a donor. Often, and this is the real thing, okay? Minorities don't do this type of stuff. We just don't. You get with you have minority people and they're like, we ain't having no babies. We ain't worried about it, whatever. But what happens is when you have people like me that are trying to have a child that would like a child to kind of look like me, it just it wasn't there. You know, there were, so what I think I chose was like a girl who was Filipino, um, to try to, well, I know she is because I pulled the pictures because you get the pictures and everything. Anyway, so I chose a woman, after that was a very odd and difficult thing to do. So I chose a woman, and I chose her, um, to be my baby mama. So what they were going to do was, she would stimulate, and she did. They stimulated her, and then we got all of the eggs that were viable. So once you stimulate, doesn't necessarily mean they pull everything, but not everything is good. So what they do is they sifted through all the good, bad stuff and left us with, I think we had like 12 eggs. I think that's what it was. I think she stimulated at 23. They retrieved 23, and then after they did everything, we had, it was like 12. And then after that, we did, then they do an ICSI, which is called, where they take the sperm and they actually place it with the egg, place it into the egg to make it. So, because you know, natural process is you put them in a petri dish and you let the swimmers go swim and do what they need to do. And ICSI is they take it even a step further and, you know, do that. So they did an ICSI and they paired it, and then so what you do after that is to see what grows, what takes. So they all still sit in the dish, and then they wait. I want to say it was not a couple hours, it's a couple of days to see what actually starts growing. And from that we had 5. So from 23 to 5. So we had 5 eggs that were stable, that were going to grow, or at least they grew enough to be placed back inside. So what we did was we put the first egg inside of me, and I got I did, once the pregnancy, we did the test and I was pregnant, and we're like, okay, great. And then we miscarried. We're like, okay, not so much. We miscarried this miscarriage happened at 3 weeks. 3 weeks. That one happened at 3 weeks. So like, okay. So then we did it again. This time we took 2 eggs and we put it inside of me. And we miscarried those at 4 weeks. 4 weeks. I want to say it was 4 weeks. I'm like, okay, so now we have 2 left. So maybe it's me. Maybe I can't carry. So my best friend, my daughter's godmother, my girl Rachel, we decided to have her carry. So if you ever go through that process, what ends up happening is you have to go through a psychological evaluation. It's rather intensive. You have to go through counseling. You, as the person, who's going to get the baby, has to go through counseling. My friend Rachel had to go through counseling. My husband and I had to go through counseling. Like we had to go through counseling, right? So we went through this counseling, and we have to pay for that out of pocket. And then you got to pay for the lawyer, because there is a lawyer agreement to that. And then, because we also had to agree to pay for all of her, if Rachel got pregnant, all of her expenses. So we had to do all of these things, right? We paid for that. Now, I'm gonna tell you guys, when we finished with Texas Fertility, when we decided to call it quits with Texas Fertility, we were in the hole, I want to say it was like $47,000 and no baby. Because what happens is our insurance didn't pay for anything because we were on the wait. We could have been trying to keep getting on the wait list for the San Antonio, the Army fertility clinic. But because I was on borrowed time, because at the same time all of this is happening, there's fibroid removal still happening. There's endometriosis still growing. So, you know, like I literally did not have the time to wait 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, however long it would have taken for the Army to pay for this. So we had to pay out of pocket. And so that meant we paid for all of our medication. We paid for everything. So $47,000, right? It was right about $47,000. And so we put the babies, the two more embryos into, not embryos, the eggs, the fertilized eggs into my friend Rachel. And those just didn't take at all. So we're like, okay. Me personally, I was done. I was done. I was tired of putting drugs in my body. I was tired of, I couldn't understand how is it, and not that I lost my faith. I never blamed God. I never said that, you know, why are you doing this to me? Although I just could not fathom, I couldn't understand, why is it that there are so many women out there who don't even want their child, or have their children and don't want to take care of them? How can these people be breeding left and right? Here I am as one person just wanting one little baby to love. I just wanted to be a mother. And so some of you are like, Christina, well, why didn't y'all adopt? Good question. My husband just didn't want to. He just didn't want to. He wanted a baby with me. And this is where I think our train started to diverge, because he was on the path of, he wanted a baby with me. That's our baby. I was on the path of, I just wanted to be somebody's mother. At this point, I didn't care. I was ready. I was done with my body. I didn't want to try with my body anymore. I was done, because during this time is, my husband was deployed quite a bit of it. So we had to freeze his stuff. So before every deployment, he froze. He went in, he did his business, and they froze his stuff. So I had it to use every time I needed to go in and, do what we need to do. So that's how all of that happened while he was deployed. And it was just me. I mean, I had my mom, I had my family, but when I went home at night, it was just me. And to keep having to put these chemicals into my body and to keep having no results. And on top of that, I'm a teacher. And so I would go to school and I see all of these faces, and I come across kids that went through some stuff, and I'm like, I could be your mother. It's just, I was in a dark place for a little bit. I was in a dark place for a little bit. So, grace. I'm not done with our story, because you're like, well, Christina, you didn't finish because you still got a girl. Yeah, we'll get there. This is where the grace comes in. I was at the point where I was done. I just wanted to adopt, and my husband wasn't to adopt, so we wanting to adopt. So we were just kind of at a dead space, right? With that, not with our marriage or anything like that, just with that. And so my husband gets noticed that he is going to become a drill sergeant. He needs to go to, he went to drill sergeant school. He came back and he's like, all right, he's got to go on a trail, right? He's got to go, we got to move. And so when he was at drill sergeant school, he was telling me that, hey, something that we do here, the guys do here, is that you guys can change, they can kind of essentially exchange where they're going to be assigned. So if you're going to someplace that you don't want to go, but another person's going to a different place, y'all can swap. Because quite frankly, the military didn't necessarily care who went, they just needed a body somewhere, right? So my husband was telling me this, and we were slated to go to Fort Benning, Georgia. And something in me told me that we should not go to Fort Benning, Georgia. This is where I tell you guys, God works through, if you listen, God is telling you what he needs to tell you. And so every fiber of my being said, Fort Benning, Georgia is not the place for us. We need to be in Columbia, South Carolina, Fort Jackson. That's where we needed to be. And I couldn't tell you why. I couldn't tell you. I just knew in my heart, in my bones, I knew that is not the place for us. We need to be in South Carolina. So I said, babe, you need to do whatever you need to do to get it switched. And thankfully he was able to get it switched. So we're like, all right. So we pack up and we move to Columbia, South Carolina. And while we there, now this is how things played out for me, guys. And I'm gonna tell you, God will do things and lay things out for you. And at that time, I had no idea. Retrospectively, I can see he had a plan. What happened was, I remember I told you I'm a teacher. And you know, when you move, you gotta find a teaching job, right? So what ended up happening was I could not find a job. I couldn't get a job. And I was like, huh, this is odd. You know, I couldn't get a job. And so what ended up happening is that I ended up working for the University of South Carolina in their English department, because I am an English teacher, so I worked in the English department. And that job gave me the flexibility to continue on treatments as I needed, you know, because literally the place that we went to was not down the road, but down the road, close enough, like a good 15-20 minutes away. Close enough for me to go do what I need to do and come back to work. Where if I were a teacher, I would have had to have taken time and blah, blah, blah. So we're in Columbia, South Carolina. The first thing I did was go ahead and get my PCM, my new primary care provider. And I'm like, hey, we're, because my husband's like, babe, we're going to keep trying. I don't want to give up on this dream. And I'm like, you know, I'm only doing this for you at this point because I don't want to do this. I want to adopt. And he's like, no, we're not going to give up on this dream. I'm like, okay. My husband would not give up on this. And so we get to South Carolina. I meet with my PCM. I was like, hey, so this is my medical history. Now, mind you, I brought everything with me from every single doctor. I had my file. I had pictures. I had DVDs. I had everything. So I brought everything with me. And I was like, look, this is me. I need to see a specialist. I need to go to an OB or fertility specialist that will help me, you know, do what I need to do. So Fort Jackson is a training post. So they do not have a full-blown hospital. And what they do is they send you off post for a lot of specialty care. Unless you have a boo-boo or a scrape, you can be seen at the clinic, because it really is just a clinic. Everything else is pushed off post. So this too ended up getting pushed off post. Now, I told you guys that TRICARE does not pay for fertility unless you get it done through TRICARE, but there is a loophole. If you are more than 200 miles away from the fertility center, the Army Fertility Center, they will pay for it. And we were in Fort Jackson, which is definitely 200 miles away from Maryland. And what ended up happening is we went to see Dr. Gail Whitman-Elia. I will post her information down below, because if anybody is in that area of Columbia, South Carolina, and you need a fertility person, Dr. Gail Whitman-Elia is your woman. When I tell you, I went into her office and I had no hope. This is a person, I had zero hope. I knew that this wasn't going to work. In my head, I knew this wasn't going to work. There was nothing this woman was going to tell me that would say that I was going to have a baby and I was going to have my own baby. I knew I needed to adopt. That was it. She looked at me and she looked at my husband and she said, all it takes is one. I said, ma'am, you want to stimulate me? You want to go in and get my ovaries? I mean, my ovaries, my eggs? You want to get my eggs? She goes, yeah, all you need is one. I said, man, I only produce 3. All you need is one. So, Dr. Gail Whitman-Elia, she was a geneticist before she became switched specialties into fertility. And so what happened was we did a whole bunch of genetic work. She did a lot of blood work, she said, because sometimes people are just incompatible, and everything come back. My husband's got super stuff. My husband got super stuff, and we are very compatible genetically. So that shouldn't have been the problem. This is also around the time that I've been diagnosed with a diminished ovarian reserve. So I was born this way. I was already born with less ovaries than an average girl. So just by numbers, let's just play the number game. If an average human female girl was born with 100 eggs, I was born with 50. And if an average human female girl, as her lifetime, she may lose like 4 eggs a month, I was losing 8. Okay, so does that you see how? So my chances alone, just by myself, let go of the endometriosis, by myself, was very slim to none. So she figured all this out for us, and she said, all you need is one. And I left, and because what she wanted to do was called a mini IVF, which is just a small stimulation, a very minimal amount of medication, and then do a freezing cycle where once they retrieved the eggs and they did the ICSI, where, remember I told you, is where they put the sperm and the egg together, and then once it grew, they froze the embryo, I think like at day 3 of growth, and they froze the embryo and they left it frozen for 30 days, and then they defrosted the embryo and put that back in me. She says, I can't tell you why. She goes, but it's something about the freezing process, she thinks, that helps. So we're like, you want to do all of that? And she's like, yes. She says, all it takes is one. Y'all, if you have gone through this fertility journey, you know that every time they retrieve your eggs, it's something. I knew in my heart, I had a good feeling about her. I really, really did. She was different. Her place, when you walk in, it was like an old Walgreens or something. And they did everything in-house. They did all of their blood work in-house. They did all of their everything that they needed to do, they did in-house. Where at Texas Fertility, you walked into that place and you could, it was opulent. Okay, like these exotic fish tanks, and you got these fuzzy socks, and it felt like the Starbucks person was gonna come and serve you too, like it was very opulent. It was very comfortable, but very opulent, a very different vibe. And I get to this place at Dr. Whitman-Elia, and her vibe was, it was clean, it was sanitary, it was comfortable, it was nice, but it was about business, a business of making babies. And when you went into there, she had a wall full of babies, nothing but baby pictures of all these babies. And you're like, dang, her proof was literally on the wall. So we're like, okay. I said, ma'am, I'm gonna trust you. I said, I'm gonna trust you. I don't know, but I'm gonna trust you. The first time my eggs were retrieved, up to this point, no one has ever retrieved my eggs because it wasn't worth it. $47,000, and it wasn't worth it to pull my eggs. I'm sorry. The first time she goes in and she pulls my 3 little follicles that only ever grew. Okay. First time she pulls my eggs, she does her thing, she does the ICSI, put the thing in the thing, she freezes it. She calls us back 30 days later, like, all right, it's time for an implantation. Because in the meantime, you're growing your lining. You do the other medications to grow your lining. Now, that was never my problem. This girl could throw a thick lining. My lining was extra padded, which is why I bled so much, is because I always grew a very thick lining. So my babies was going to be cozy. But, yeah, so she grew, she transferred the baby into me. And so we only ended up inputting 2 because one of them, after the freezing process, didn't really grow very well. And so 2 of them went in, and out came my one 9 months later. And my girl, I think she ate the other one because she is a whole hot mess. But yo, $47,000 in South Carolina. We paid less than $5,000. I think my husband and I were talking about it. Like we were right around $3,800 because we had to pay for the anesthesia when they did the implantation or retrieval, and we had to pay for the medications. TRICARE took care of everything. When I say God is good, God said you need to go here. Now there are so many other things, because the way this story plays out, my husband, while we're going through all of this, and this was a good, this is a good 4 or 5 years into our marriage. During this time, my husband lost his mother, his grandmother, his grandmother, his aunt, and his mother, all within like a couple of years of each other. And when we were in Texas, this is where let me get there, guys. Just hang with me, because this is why I'm saying God is good. And this is where the grace comes in, because when we were in Texas, after my husband lost his mother, I knew he wasn't in a good spot. We just knew. And we had just made the move. We had been in South Carolina for about a year. And so when we moved from Texas to South Carolina, we had a little bit of a nest egg, because we knew that we were going to try again when we got to South Carolina. So we had a little bit of a nest egg, and we spent part of that. Had we not had that nest egg, we were with that nest egg, we were able to, because let me get my time right. We get to South Carolina, we meet Dr. Whitman-Elia, we go through this whole process. I'm pregnant. My husband's mother passes. Because we had about $10,000. I don't know why I'm saying we had about $10,000, and it only took us about $3,500 to get to have the baby, or to get pregnant. And so the rest of that money was essentially our little savings. And so my husband's mother passed, and we had the money to help take care of her services and such. We were able to pay for a lawyer to bring on my husband's brother. At the time he was 15, and we were able to pay for him to get a lawyer and take care of all of that legally, so we could have my brother-in-law. And then, with that, me being pregnant, I kid you not, my husband, he was not in a good spot. And if it wasn't for this little bitty being growing inside of me, God gave us what we needed, who we needed, when we needed it the most. God knew that my husband may not make it from losing his grandmother, his aunt, and his mother. My husband's a strong man, but there's only so much that a person can lose before they start losing themselves. And I think us being pregnant was an anchor for my husband, because he had something to look forward to. God knew what he was doing. When God takes, he also gives. And she was needed. She very much was needed, because I don't know where and I hope he doesn't mind. Babe, I hope you don't mind. But I don't know. I don't know what would have happened with my husband. Not that I think, he would have done anything, but I just feel as though that she was his anchor. She was the joy that he needed in his life. God is good, and things happen the way they need to happen. And the crazy thing about it is, after my daughter was born, we're like, okay, this works. Let's try it again. But we had to leave South Carolina. And so we came back to we went back to Texas, and oh my God. So we went back to Texas, and we went back to Texas Fertility, and we're like, hey, you remember when you said you couldn't pull my eggs and because it wasn't worth it? And well, we want to do this again. We would like for y'all to try to do this again and repeat what she did back in South Carolina. And they wouldn't. They said, no, you might want to just try what they did in South Carolina. Like, okay, like we wanted that same process, but they wouldn't do it. Like, okay. And they wouldn't even acknowledge the fact that they couldn't do what somebody else did. It was just hurtful. It was really hurtful. And then on top of that, so we're like, okay, we're gonna try a different place. So we went to, is it St. David's? There's another Saint something up in Temple, Texas that we went to, and that doctor, y'all, if I had not been a stronger person, I would have came up, he would have crushed me, because that doctor, I went in, it was the one appointment I only had with him, and I was like, okay, again, taking my records, because this girl keep her records. I take my records. I'm like, hey, these are all the things, but this is what I want done. Can you do this? Because this worked. And he's flipping through everything. He's like, and he was their top specialist. He was the one that takes on difficult cases. So I'm like, okay, well, I am a difficult case, but you can handle this for me, because you're supposed to be the specialist, the number one guy at this hospital that does this. He looked, if my husband was here, he would tell you, this doctor looked at me, looked at the file, and looked at me. He goes, I wouldn't touch you with a 9-foot pole. He goes, I wouldn't touch it. I'm not gonna do this. He goes, count your blessings, be thankful you have your daughter, or go back to South Carolina, because I'm not gonna do this. What doctor tells you that? Like, he said that. Anyway. So, needless to say, we have tried since then. So now that we're in Virginia, we've tried since I've been in Virginia, but the problem is that my fibroids and the endometriosis just kept growing and kept growing. And since then, my right ovary started getting cysts and fibroids and things. And so it just wasn't, we found a doctor here at VCU who was willing to try to repeat the process from Dr. Whitman-Elia in South Carolina, but it wasn't going to happen. My diminished ovarian reserve got to the point to where it was severely diminished, and the endometriosis wasn't really allowing things to happen. And on top of that, it kept causing me so much more pain. So I finally had a full hysterectomy, where they took everything, every lady part, everything from my cervix to my fallopian tubes to my uterus itself, the other little nibbit of my other little ovary that I had left. They took everything, and that is where I have been since. I will say it has been a very healing time for me, because it also, I'm not ever going to be able to produce a baby of my own again, but I needed to be pain-free. The pain that I was living through and going through daily, every day, I did not know. Once the stuff was out of me, night and day, like I didn't realize I was holding so much. I didn't realize I did not know a life could be led without pain, because it was my normal. So if you are a person who is going through any of this and you would want to talk one-on-one, I am absolutely here for you. Reach out to me on my Instagram, DM me. Let me know, if you have any questions or you want to talk. I will say that I can't remember all my numbers. I really don't remember all my numbers and the levels and things like that, and what my FHC or whatever. I don't remember all of that. I didn't keep that meticulous of records. But I can tell you that I would be happy to share my story with you in more specific detail if you'd like. I will say this though, I am not going to tell you that it will all work out in the end. I hated hearing that. I hated hearing, well, it's going to be okay. It's going to work out. It's going to be all right. You know, I hated hearing that. I'm not going to tell you that because I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be all right for you. I don't know what God has in store for you. It may be that you're not going to be able to have children. It may be you might have the one. It may be the person you pop out triplets. I don't know. All I do know is that as you reflect upon your journey, understand that there is a plan. We don't know that plan, but there is a plan. And whatever that plan is, you as the individual have to find it within yourself to remain strong and keep your faith. Because I will tell you, never once did I say, why are you doing this to me? Or I don't believe anymore. I never went that far because I knew at some point there was going to be a leaf that I needed to turn. When and how it happened, no idea. So that is my fertility story. I am happy now that I think my husband and I are in a good place because I mean, I'm not gonna say I don't want another one. I would love another child. I obviously would have to be through adoption. I don't think my husband wants to adopt anymore and do anything, but I wouldn't mind adopting. But whatever your journey is, just know that if you have a partner that's going to be there with you, make sure that you communicate, you guys talk, you don't lose faith in each other. Like if my husband, if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have her because he's the one. I told you, I gave up. And I hate saying gave up because it's not it. It's that I gave in. I said, okay, this isn't just I'll just be somebody's mama. Let me adopt. I'll just be somebody's mama. But my husband is the one that would not. And he didn't give up on it. And here we have this beautiful, beautiful little girl. So yeah. It worked for us, but just barely. So yeah. Below in the comments, or in the description box, like I said, I'll put down Dr. Gail Whitman-Elia information. If I can find it all again, well, should be able to find it all again. Hopefully she's still doing what she does. But I will put her stuff in the description box below. But like I said, if you want to reach out to me, talk to me, feel free. I will talk about this journey any and all the time. I am glad that I am no longer on these medications. I think they do take a toll on you, having to put these needles in your body day in, day out. And these things aren't thick. I mean, they're not small. They're pretty thick. If you've ever seen any, and the bags of needles that you have, like if you ever seen somebody going through this fertility stuff, it's no joke. It is no joke. I'm glad I'm not doing any of that anymore. I'm glad that I no longer am in pain. I do wish that no, I don't. I'm glad I'm no longer in pain. I was gonna say I wish that I tried some way to save some of my ovaries, some of my eggs from my ovaries, but they weren't. It wasn't gonna happen. Like they weren't, because for the longest time I always produced 3. Or the last time we did it, I didn't. I produced 1, just 1. Yeah. So that's my fertility story. If you stuck with me this long, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah, you guys are amazing. Life is amazing. And if kids aren't your thing, then that is fine too, to you. But I'm happy and we are happy. So as always, have a magically blessed day and know I'll be praying for you. And thank you for listening. Bye, guys.